I think one of the things today is, and I think we all struggle with, is about developing new audiences and understanding who our audiences are. And I think we've always come from this kind of makeup of people will come. If you get the marketing right, people will come. Well, I don't actually agree with that. I mean, I think marketing is a very broad tool, but I think there are ways to develop audiences that we need to think about a little bit differently. So one of the things that we work very strongly on is about how do we actually build relationships with our audiences? How do we actually engage with them? What can we build around that that's defined and actually gives them something to take away from the experience rather than about us giving them an experience, about what can audiences take out of our experiences. So it's really about building relationships. Building value in the actual product, I think, is really important, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges of organisations, because if you come from an organisation such as a large cultural institution, you know, we've got a number of different charters. You know, we've got one that the government pays us for, and then we've got this thing about building value and engagement. And I think, you know, for our audiences, you know, satisfaction and loyalty, if people walk out of that experience and they go and tell 10 other people about what a great experience they've had because you've actually met the brief of them personally, it's fantastic. And if you're doing that, then you're doing a great job, let me tell you, because it's really challenging. One of the things I think that today is that we've always said this thing about, you know, you can see over here, you know, on the left-hand side, is about the way that, you know, traditional businesses have always run their business. So it's, you know, top management down. And, you know, you go to middle management, you go to frontline managers, who are the people who really know what's going on in the organisation, I believe. And then you've got your audiences at the bottom. I actually think we've got to turn it upside down. And I actually think we've got to talk about the audience first, and then what products and what we need to do to actually build that audience. So it's a bit of a cultural shift in how people see to do their business. And I think, what can I say about it is that, you know, it's a big challenge for people to think differently about that audience and where they actually sit in the profile of an organisation. How do we actually create an audience or connect to the audience? I think the key things that everybody needs to do is share your story. I think that's what's really going to connect with audiences, and that's about, for us, it's about telling the Australian story through portraiture and connecting to the known and the unknown people in Australia. That's what we do at the Portrait Gallery. I think it's kind of interesting because I've worked across a couple of cultural institutions, and the story at the Portrait Gallery, from coming from a museum environment, people walk into the Portrait Gallery and they have a completely different experience to what they had at the National Museum, which is my previous life for 10 years. And I watch people in the space, and I look at them taking away the stories that we're telling them about the people in the that we're showing. And you actually see a real connection, which I think when you've got portraiture, people can relate to the people. It's an easier story to sell. And look, I do use really tacky terms because I'm a marketer from way back, so just excuse me if I offend anybody, probably about sell and product. Whereas at the museum, you know, we went from having a Vegemite jar to having, you know, Hills hoist, to having, you know, beautiful objects that told incredible stories. But there was stories that people had to actually go through a whole gallery to experience and connect to, and I think it's a really big challenge in museums today. I think the other thing people need to think about is delivering a high value. And by value I mean that it actually really resonates with people, and, you know, people really connect to it. And building the loyalty, what we want is people coming back. And I think that's the biggest trick about it. If you don't actually engage people, they'll never come back to your organisation or engage with you as an artist. So, you know, I can tell you now that at the National Portrait Gallery, you know, 70% of our audiences actually come from outside Canberra. I can tell you that, you know, we have people who've come back 10 times, and we have first-time visitors still. At the National Museum, you know, 60% of our audiences came from interstate, 10% came internationally. You know, 30% of our audiences are really Canberran. So it's a kind of interesting challenge for organisations such as ours to actually deliver to those different types of experiences, because if you've got Canberrans coming, they want to engage much more deeply and come back much more frequently. But if you've got somebody who's here for 2 days, you know, how do you actually engage them and give them a valued experience? So for us, it's challenging. And I think for anybody it's challenging, because most of you would probably work in an organisation that has a lot of Canberra-based or regional-based people, and giving them a different reason to come back and proposition, you need to understand what they're looking for in that. So, loyalty and values. Look, I think that building loyalty in your audience, because that's the key to actually engaging people. People go away, they talk about the experience, they tell their friends, they bring their friends back, they go home to whatever state, territory, wherever they may be in Australia, and say, next time you go to Canberra, you've actually got to go and do this. And I think, for me, that's the key, is building the loyalty in the audience. And I think, and we'll go into this more deeply, so this is kind of just the overview here. And I think that, you know, despite what we do in marketing, nobody can replace, marketing's there to get people in the door. Once you get them in the door, what you've got to do is provide that experience, which builds all of those values and the loyalty with the audience. So, you know, and I have, you know, I've had a lot of marketing experience, and sometimes you do it really well, and sometimes you just completely miss the mark because you actually haven't tapped into it. And I think one of the biggest challenges for marketers today is how to use that social media environment. You know, it's continually changing, it's challenging. Are people tuning out of social media? I mean, I've got a daughter who's 25 today, and she just doesn't engage in her social media programs at all anymore, because she just says it just totally rules her life. So, you know, and it's got to be a two-way thing in social media, and that's an incredible resource and time, effort and energy to do that as well. So I think what you've got to do is actually get your value proposition right first. So you have to understand what your business is, who you are, what do you want to say to those people out there. And that's the biggest challenge. And what are people going to get from the experience that they're going to have with you? And I think that, you know, positioning the offer is a key to actually engaging and telling people what type of experience they might have before they walk in the door. I've got an example here, and I used a really well-known example because I think it kind of keeps it quite simple, this particular organisation, not being commercial at all. But, you know, Volvo. If you look at what Volvo represents to people, to a customer out there, first thing that comes to mind is safety. So people know if I buy a Volvo car, it's going to be a safe car. You know, I think they've got better looking over the years. I actually learned how to drive in a Volvo. Let me tell you, it's like a tank. But you knew if you got hit, that you were going to be okay. So it has actually got its core proposition right, because it does say safety. It does engage people to say that it's one of the safest cars on the road. And I think the thing is about it also is that, you know, Volvos last forever. You know, they go 10, 20 years without many problems. I think that's kind of a belief out there in the marketplace. They've got good service, they've got longer warranty. I mean, that's a proposition that they sell to their customers to actually sell their cars. And I think that, you know, the value delivery system is the customer feeling on the way to obtaining the offering in their whole marketing campaign. And when they finally get to the purchase, is, you know, really important to them, and they feel good about the purchase because it's met everything that you've put out there in the marketplace. So it's really about the value proposition. Although it's very commercial, it's kind of an easy one to think about, but if you overlay that with a number of organisations, some people do it really well, and some people, you know, take a few hints. I mean, you know, like even if you think about politics, you know, some of those advisors out there, you just want to say, what are you doing? But, you know, you're not engaging it.